So I did a radio interview a little while ago. It was for Gods of a Dead World release, and the host, DJ personality man, said that he figured the Gods of a Dead World would resonate with a younger audience. And I did not take that as an insult. I don't necessarily agree with him, but his reasoning was that it has a little bit of everything. And that started a discussion that I thought was really interesting. I'm going to try to repeat it as much as I can, because we had very similar views about it, and it was a good talk, which is, two guys, I'm early 30s, he's early 40s, right? Seeing how metal is to the newer generation, to the Zoomers, it's so different than what we grew up with. And I'm going to say we for people my age and probably for Gen Xers as well, because when I was in high school, which is when you listen to metal, there was a lot of elitism, and I've talked about metal elitism a lot on here, but today I'm saying the opposite. There was a lot of, if you listen to these certain bands, that's real and good, and if you listen to these bands, then that's shitty poser metal. And of course, some people just listening for the sake of listening to it, they don't care. But for people who were immersed in the subculture, there was always a line being drawn, and it was really interesting to see just over the course of my life. When I was in high school, Slipknot was shitty poser music, but then you have bands who are now citing them as influence and taking influence from them, who are real metal. And bands like Killswitch and Avenged Sevenfold and Azai, all these metalcore bands at the time, the real metalheads were like shitting on them. They're in the metal archives now. Slipknot still isn't, but they're in the metal archives. Agoraphobic Nosebleed isn't, because grind isn't metal. That is a different video. But what we're talking about today is observations from a millennial about the younger generation and how they view metal, how they view music in general. Because with the advent of streaming and online music consumption, these boundaries of you have to be like this to listen to this, it's gone away largely. At least, again, this is all just from what I can tell as a millennial. These boundaries of you dress this way, you look this way, you listen to this type of music doesn't really exist anymore, and neither do these stringent definitions of the subgenres themselves. For example, when I was exploring that sort of wave, like witch house, dark electronic gothy type genre, one of the interesting things was you'd pull up an album and it just looked like an electronic album, and all of the similar bands, according to Spotify, were all just sort of dark electronic trap goth music, and it was just a metal album. Like, it was just unquestionably a metal album. Every song had loud, distorted guitars and super heavy drums and like distorted, screamed vocals. And it's like, this is an electronic artist. That's what I would say is an electronic artist, because it's not a metal artist making a metal album. And that's just kind of normal. You hear metal influences in that music like a lot. That boundary is being blurred, combined with the fact that one of the biggest bands right now that's resonating with the younger generation, I'm going to say because I'm old, is Sleep Token. Sleep Token is a band that merges genty, proggy metal with pop, R&B, and stuff that normally is not allowed in metal. I did like Anthony Fantana's blistering hot take that there's nothing here that Imagine Dragons isn't doing. And whether or not you like Sleep Token, you have to see the fact that they are throwing a whole bunch of genres into what is metal, but it doesn't fit the definition of metal that I'm familiar with, because this generation doesn't really give a shit. One album that I did get into was what was it called? Like Love is the Death of Peace of Mind or whatever by Bad Omens. And that is a similar thing where it's a very hooky, catchy, almost R&B inspired music with these ridiculously heavy, super blown out chugga-chug guitars and drums and stuff. And the person who introduced it to me is more than a decade younger than me. And it wasn't pitched to me as this crazy fusion of different genres. It was just, here's a thing I like. And I listened to it and it's like, that's illegal. Like from my standpoint, knowing what I know about metal, that's an illegal move. You're not allowed to be that catchy. You're not allowed to be that hooky. And you're not allowed to go from that many extremes. Like if you're doing the extremes thing, that's fine, but that's prog, and so you have to be fucking jerking off the whole time while you're doing it. You can't make simplistic music with a super wide dynamic range. It's literally illegal in metal. But they don't give a shit. And that's the point that I keep coming back to. My other anecdote is I stopped listening to deathcore in 2012, and I came back as an adult, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, the technicality of modern deathcore is past what I would consider technical death metal 10 years ago, but it has clean vocals. A lot of it has clean vocals, which again, illegal move. You're not allowed to be that heavy and then also have clean vocals. And I get that, like, that's where music was headed, right? Because we're always going to the most extremes. And you listen to fucking Lorna Shore, they don't have clean vocals, but it's like that is an extreme. That is a logical extreme for like drumming and breakdowns and that sort of thing. And lots of other bands playing that similar thing, they do use the clean vocals, which is interesting because deathcore, as I knew it, was always a weird outlier genre, because deathcore was music that the elitists despised because it was trendy, and similarly the people wearing the band merch, the people wearing Job for a Cowboy hoodies, were scene girls. And were they listening to that music? Some of them were, but definitely not all of them. Even just from personal experience, I knew people who they were wearing that shit. They were not listening to that shit. And that's how the true metal people like saw that genre. And you know, it was made by the fucking, well, the deathcore bros with the gauges, and like they were scene people making music that, from one definition, was heavier than normal metal, but still not allowed to be metal. Because that's the thing. The argument is always, are breakdowns heavy? And the thing is, yes, they are. But if you're an elitist and you don't think it's music, which I didn't for a while, then yeah, it kind of also isn't. Deathcore was really weird because, like pop music, it had almost no substance. You know, I would spin me a loud as fuck Emmure album, but I would feel gross because there's nothing there to chew on. It's just fun, which is like most pop albums. And that's kind of how it came across. And it existed, again, we're talking 2007 to 2012, okay? My experience with deathcore. 2006, 2007, like, you know, Doom EP. That was my experience with it. It was a weird outlier genre. It didn't really have, like, its core. There were groups of people that I knew who, like, they took it and the real metal and they didn't differentiate between the two. You know, heavy is heavy, brutal is brutal. But they didn't like the clean vocals. That was the thing. That wasn't allowed. They didn't like the clean vocals. They were listening to death metal is fine, deathcore is fine, but you don't got the gay shit, is what they called it in 2007. I'm sorry. And now I'm old and I have a child, and deathcore is the most prominent subgenre of metal with this generation. And I did see somebody mention like Lorna Shore. Oh, it's Zoomers who haven't listened to Flesh God Apocalypse. And while I do love Flesh God Apocalypse, I don't think that that's charitable. Flesh God certainly feels like older school metal. Like what they're doing is innovative, and they are forging their own path in the genre. However, it's metal in the sense that you gotta sit down and you know what it's about, and you understand that. Oh my god, how do I even explain this? Like, Lorna Shore has vocals and breakdowns that are just designed to make you go, sorry, what? And deathcore was always like that. When they're doing the fucking breeze, like, it wasn't because it sounded good. It was because they were trying to just push as far as they could into what the fucking fuck was that, you know? And they're still doing that, except now that they have computers to produce all the albums, everything is so blisteringly technical and ridiculously like just super fast and computery. They're using that to still do that, right? From a real metal perspective, if you can blast that fast for that long, why the fuck are you playing breakdowns, right? But the Lorna Shore breakdowns are like, again, it feels like an illegal move. It feels like it's too shameless and heavy to even be allowed. And it's something that Flesh God would never do. They've established a sound, but it's just the core of it is different. And if you don't get that, then it's very, very tough to explain. It's the same thing where, like, I remember when I was getting into aggro tech, harsh EBM, listening to like Grendel is still my favorite, but call it like God Module, Suicide Commando, Aesthetic Perfection before the clean vocals, that type of shit. This older fucking Gen Xer dude is like, this is, or what was the other one? Agnostic Front? No, I don't know. Whatever. The Gen X dude was like, they're not doing anything that Skinny Puppy didn't already do. Okay. And so sweet, more industrial. And then I listened to Skinny Puppy, and it's like, no, this is not the same at all. And I get that because it's an expansion of the sound you're familiar with, you think that it sounds the same because the boomer brain stops processing new stuff and just tries to grasp onto what it already knows. And like, and I'm like, no shade, like I'm the same way. I listened to Ghosty Mane, and I'm just like, this is literally Broken Side if they listened to Eminem instead of Lil Jon. That is a keeper quote, by the way. and like with my own music, okay, like I've listen. What is happening? Who the fuck is going through emails on a Sunday? Get the hell off your computer. I hate Fear Factory. They have the potential to be good, and all of the elements that they use are used in the worst possible way. It's like if you took all of the best things that you could possibly make metal with and then used every single component individually in the worst way possible. Okay? I cannot stress how bad I think Fear Factory is. Yet, Design Abstract always gets compared to them. And on a very superficial level, like, yeah, I get it, because it is all the same elements. The problem is, like, okay, if you're a Gen Xer, and when you were 14, that Fear Factory album with the metal ribcage came out, and you're like, this is fucking sick. And the people didn't say sick back then. The hell did they say back then? This is tubular. And then remember, that's where your boomer brain stops. And in this case, boomer brain is any age. I have boomer brain. And then you listen to newer, fresher arrangements of the same things, and you're like, oh, this sounds like Fear Factory, and it objectively doesn't. I'm not too much for the self-promotion and the patting myself on the back. Just on Abstract is fucking better than Fear Factory, and if we had the amount of funding that they do, oh my god. Anyway, Fear Factory sucks. But it's the same thing, where this specific sound has been expanded upon after you as a human being have stopped developing and necessarily like absorbing and digesting new information, especially about things that you care about so near and dear. Where did I start that tangent? I need to go watch this video so I can remember what I was talking about. I'm so sorry. Right, we were talking about Flesh God and that other one, Lorna Shore. We're talking about Flesh God and Lorna Shore, right? And the millennials and the Gen Xers listen to Lorna Shore, and it's like, Flesh God already did that. No, Flesh God got the bar to a certain point, and Lorna Shore took it and did way more bonkers shit with it. And it's using the same elements, but it's not the same. If you listen to Flesh God and don't listen to Lorna Shore, you are missing something. Whether you like it or not, that's not the point. I don't like it, but like I'm still using them as an example because I understand what's going on. And that is how music is. And the biggest thing about this, the biggest analysis about coming back to, again, the advent of streaming and the younger generation getting into metal, is that they don't have these walls surrounding genres. Even just like what you listen to, it's just everything. It's just what you listen to. You make a playlist of stuff you like, and it's not based on genre because you're not going to the store to buy a CD, which is what I did because I was in that transitionary period, right? Like I was a teenager when how young was I? Like I was a teenager when we were still using CDs, right? I was like in my adolescence, early teens when like the beginning of MP3 players took over. So like some people still just use Discmans, or Walkmans. And it was basically just like the start of my high school was the shift from like shitty MP3 players and like the advent of the iPod and stuff like that. But keep in mind, a lot of people were still just ripping CDs because not everyone knew how to torrent stuff and, you know, LimeWire and all that stupid shit. It was in the middle of that. But if you wanted an algorithm to tell you if you like this, you should check out this. That was Last FM, and you had to log in your shit to it. Does anyone remember Last FM? Like, it's kind of still better than Spotify for some things. That's a boomer take. But for most people, they were listening to what their friends were listening to because you would just share out music. And there wasn't this algorithm digging up this super obscure shit and also just, like, using really weird criteria to, oh, if you like this, you'll probably also like this, which is great and novel. Just a completely different thing. But that is one of the main factors for this obliteration of this barrier between genres. It doesn't matter what you look like because you're just going to listen to whatever anyway. And this is great for metal. I'm not going to say it's not. Even if most of the highest contributing aspects of it I don't like. Lorna Shore, Spirit Box, Ghost is okay. What was the other one? I don't like Sleep Token either. Sorry. But that growth and that paving the way is good for metal overall. Metal is so conservative and so resistant to change that type of shit is awesome. And I wish that I had the time to explore even more of that stuff. The only time I've ever heard electronic and black metal mixed has been bad and shitty and not good. And I just feel like somebody out there has made it good. Somewhere, you know. But even blending black metal and deathcore aesthetic into not that. There's this album, it's an electronic album, this one, and that aesthetic, that appropriating the extreme metal aesthetic but doing it in this like glitzy bubblegum way, fucking amazing. I wish I liked that album more. It is good, but like I wish I like loved it because the aesthetic is so cool, and I wish that more people would do that. More people do need to appropriate metal, both musically and just aesthetically. And oh yeah, people wearing band shirts, they can't name 3 songs. Good. If your band made a piece of fashion and people are using it for fashion, guess what? That's its intended purpose. Fuck off with the people wearing Metallica and Slayer. First of all, those bands in the context of 2023, they are somewhere in between a pop band and a fashion choice, okay? Sorry, somebody had to tell you. In a sense, metal is almost behind a lot of other genres in being sort of hybridized and broken down and fused with other genres. And like, that's not to say, like, obviously we have a ton of subgenres that combine thing with other thing, right? You take black metal and you take classical and you've got symphonic black metal. Obviously, I would know all about that. You take folk instruments and melodic death metal, you've got folk metal. Like, yeah, right, but they're all very still stringent in their definitions. So if you're going to make symphonic black metal or you're going to make folk metal, you're approaching it prescriptively, not descriptively. You're not creating something and then the result happens to be this. You're going in with the intent purpose of catering to tropes that already exist in order to make a thing that already exists. And you might be doing it in a different way. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, we can use more melodeath. Like, don't not play melodeath just because it's already established. But from what I've heard of the Zoomers and how they use metal, they use it just like that. It's a flavor. It's an aesthetic. It's something that they're not going into it being like, I'm going to try to make this type of thing. And that's why a lot of the albums that I've found where it's like, this is fucking metal. Like, it's not labeled as metal because they don't care, because they're just using that as a flavor, just as an aesthetic. But like, it's an electronic album or it's a whatever, even a rap album. It's a flavor and it's an aesthetic, and they're not being bound by the pre-existing tropes of whatever thing they're doing, which is super fucking cool. And it's not to say people from my generation, like, no one's ever done that before. Like, the Zoomers just invented not being stupid. But it was a lot more clicky and segmented, and it would have even been worse in the 80s. And like for Gen Xers, right, because you did literally have to go to the store to buy a CD, and so like the music that got shared around, they were in certain groups of people because you were physically passing around CDs. Like, at least we had the internet. Largely where you were getting your music was still from friends, right? You were like sharing around band names and awful LimeWire downloads and stuff like that, and you were still going to CD stores to buy CDs to put on your iPod a lot of the time. But it was still this idea of like, you know, I several times got shit for listening to metal but presenting myself goth, and people laugh at me for that. But to me, it makes sense. Like, I get it. Goths listen to goth music. Metalheads listen to metal music. I was a goth listening to metal. People now think that's pretty much the same thing. Those were worlds apart when I was in high school. And then, not to mention, I didn't want to tell them I was secretly also just listening to Britney Spears and Hannah Montana and Lady Gaga. I would fucking fight to the death defending Lady Gaga in high school. God damn. Fucking love me some Lady Gaga. And, well, it seems like people overwhelmingly of the younger generations are more like that. These rules and guidelines and segregations of different genres and styles, to me, it all makes sense, and I get why it's like that, even if I think it's stupid. And it's still really hard for me to wrap my brain around electronic and rap artists using metal in the way that they do. Or yeah, like these newer bands that just take a whole whack ton of influences. It's pop, it's R&B, it's gent, it's prog, I guess, it's atmospheric, it's doom, like all these sort of things, and just like melds together into just being this thing that has wildly contrasting sections, from the softest soft to the most aggressive. And like, my boomer brain is that I can't get past that that's what they're doing. But for most people, they're not thinking about it like that. They're just thinking, oh, I like this. Oh, weird, this is metal I like. Or probably more accurately, this is metal that doesn't feel old and stiff. Because metal is so resistant to use influences, again, that aren't prescribed by specific tropes and subgenres, that I think to a newcomer it would seem really stiff and really stilted and really like, oh, this is it. Like, why don't any of the parts in the song ever change? I'd love to get like a zoomer in and just like interview them, you know. But I'm glad that even music that, you know, that my ancient fucking brain can understand, they are pushing that direction where it doesn't matter as much. I've used carcinogenesis as an example, just because I was just really, really excited and inspired by a band that plays ridiculously heavy death metal, deathcore. It's hard to classify. Death metal, deathcore. And it's just like, this just has Slipknot energy, but it's real metal. And it's got the clean vocals, and it's got the super raw, barky, stripped down vocals instead of just like quad tracked. Like, and hearing that in a style whose surrounding bands would necessarily be very wooden and very to the point, very, very old metal. It was super refreshing. And of course, they're not even like going super fucking crazy. They weren't throwing like electronic stuff. They weren't throwing R&B stuff. Like, I'm looking for more bands like Bad Omens, right? I'm going to use Bad Omens as my stand-in for Sleep Token because I just don't particularly like Sleep Token. And Bad Omens, from my understanding, doesn't do it that much differently. It's just the one that I seemed to like. Catchy, shamelessly, illegally catchy, shameless fucking clean vocal parts. Like, I had to stop listening to it because I would just wake up and it would just be stuck in my head like fucking permanently forever. and just contrasted with super down-tuned, super like clean, chunky, crisp, modern guitar parts. Not overly technical or anything, but the dynamics surpassed like grunge, you know, for like low lows and high highs, like I said. And I would love to find more bands like that. But like Carcinogenesis by Viscera doesn't even go that hard, but I still get this sort of like, it's a change, it's an evolution. And I don't know how old those guys are. They could be my age, but they're definitely playing to people who are not my age. I can tell just in the way they're sort of lightening up on those boundaries, is, I guess, a way to put it. We, as the people who are, you know, old enough to have to pass the torch to the younger generation, it's so weird to talk to people that are playing like throwback classic metalcore, and it's just like the shit that I listened to in high school. But then I realize I'm like literally twice their age, so okay. I'm not in the habit of just talking to 15-year-olds, by the way. I just like Fiverr. I don't control who's on Fiverr, and I'll take anyone's money. But I've met a lot of cool people that way, and I've learned a lot of new music that I wouldn't have normally learned because these people are so much younger than me and way more in tune with what's going on with music because I'm old. This breaking down of barriers between subgenres, between stereotypes in a way. You can't just look at someone and know the type of music that they're going to play. You look at Ghosty Man, you don't know that he's going to be fucking rapping. I mean, he's also screaming, but you know, I'm really happy that this is the direction that metal is going, because for a while it just seemed like it would just kind of be nothing. Like, we have this kind of long history. I mean, I'm not going to talk about 80s metal because I don't know shit about 80s metal, and like 90s metal was just, it sucked. In 2000s we had new metal, which sucked, and some good like actual metal albums that I like started happening. Melodeath, symphonic black metal, normal black metal. I guess 90s had black metal. You know, fucking just I'm whatever. Fuck it. But late 2000s, 2010s saw the birth of metalcore, and 2010s saw the birth of the most fucking post-processed garbage metalcore known to man, with turbo auto-tune vocals, and nobody played the drums, and all the guitars were so cut up they might as well have been sampled, and soulless garbage music. And I listened to all of it, but it was soulless garbage music, okay? And then not soon after, we got Gent, which took those elements but played them in a more fuck the downbeat kind of way, where the drummers went from just playing like the most basic stripped down caveman metal beats to like everyone had to be like a fucking trained jazz musician with all the fucking accents and all the syncopation and shit. Like, I'm just gonna say it, I don't like Gent. I was 1,000% on board early Gent movement, okay? Like, that first wave of bands, I was eating that shit up. I was in heaven. Fucking like, Altered State came out. I bought that shit, double gatefold vinyl. I loved that album. And then the boomer brain set in, right? Because then I was older than 20, and Tesseract had a follow-up album, and I was like, this just sounds like Altered State. And the next wave of Gent bands came, and I was like, this just sounds like Altered State. And then suddenly I'm being the person that I'm criticizing and being like, there's nothing here that Tesseract didn't already do in 2012. Sure, there is, but my fucking brain solidified, and all those new nuances and elements, they're lost on me, and I don't like it. And it's partially a processing thing. As I've ranted about, I heard a Spirit Box song, and I was like, the fact that like the cutoff on the guitar is like quantized to the thing, it's just robot music. I hate like noise gate as an instrument music. I don't know, it's not like I can play guitar, but sure as fuck there ain't no noise gates on any Abstracted Records albums, nor is there like hard cut editing for breakdowns unless it's like Project Technophage, and even then not really. I just don't like how it sounds. It's too easy, it's too hacky, in the sense that any fucking hack can play it, and I can't, but Logan can. Yeah. So, and the thing with the next wave of Gent is that like it got and continues to be so goddamn computerized and like shiny and plasticky, and it's like it's just a repeat of the 2010s metalcore, but just like instead of garbage like string skipping riffs, it's just and it's like I don't like it. I don't like syncopation. I'm German. I like when things are on the fucking downbeat. Whatever. What I'm trying to get at is that seemed like the next logical conclusion of where does metal go now. And it kind of seems like it's there. I've talked about maybe there will be a pushback of like aggressive, shitty, noisy music to counteract that. But while that's happening, there are bands that are using, it's still kind of Gent to me, unfortunately. Like that syncopated, bouncy 8-string shit is kind of just part and parcel with modern metal. That's kind of just the sound of it. I'm not okay with that aspect of it, which is why I don't like a lot of those bands. That's why I don't like Spirit Box. If Spirit Box played in a normal fucking tuning and just like left their guitars alone, like no noise gate. And it's like, well, it would sound super messy. Good, then don't write it like that, or just let it be messy. Again, I'm a boomer. I probably like it more. But all the other shit going on, all the non-metal elements, or more accurately, the metal elements used in non-metal contexts. If that's what we can expect from the Zoomers and how they interpret metal, then fuck yeah, keep it up. It's just super interesting, and that's sort of my angle on it.